Welcome to the Whole Health Podcast,
where a functional nutritionist and a biological dentist investigate the interconnectedness of your health.
Let's get started. All right, we're really excited today to have Pilar Gerasimo here with us. She is an award-winning health journalist, pioneering social explorer, and author of The Healthy Deviant, a rule breaker's guide to being healthy in an unhealthy world. Best known for her visionary work as founding editor of Experience Life magazine, which today reaches more than 3 million people with each issue. Pilar has also served as top health editor for the Huffington Post and as visiting faculty for the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. Today, Pilar co-hosts a top-rated podcast called The Living Experiment, so go check that out, and teaches online courses through her digital learning platform. We are so excited to have you here with us today, Pilar.
Well, I'm just delighted and thrilled to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited for this. I mean, what a great intro. Like, you're a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to think so.
Thank you for blessing us with your time. So, Megan covered a lot of that in the intro. I'm so curious to understand, as a health journalist, what's the backstory that led you down this path?
Well, my foray into journalism was a bit accidental to begin with. I went to school for comparative literature. I thought I was going to be an academic like my dad, who was a sociology professor. And I studied French and thought that this whole world of teaching was going to be open to me. And I ended up getting a Fulbright and teaching in Paris for a brief period after college, and suddenly realized I did not really love teaching academic topics. I loved teaching, but I liked teaching what I really loved and knew myself in my bones, and that I had found to be the most valuable in my life. So what happened to me is what happened to a lot of people on the personal front. Just the life of being in this crazy mixed up world of ours had me losing my health and fitness the more I complied with the culture and its expectations. And the crisis of confidence that I had in my career, about clarity about what I wanted to do and achieving what I thought I was supposed to achieve, and getting all of the good marks, really sent me into a spiral. And the combination of physical health degradation and mental emotional health degradation got me to a low point where I had to work really aggressively to get back my health and fitness. And in the process of doing that, I really learned a lot about what works and doesn't work, and sometimes what's counterproductive in so-called health improvement. And it made me very passionate about wanting to share that information. So after a long bout of experimenting, I fell into custom publishing. From custom publishing, I kind of accidentally stumbled into magazine editing. And then I had the very unusual experience of getting to pitch a very new model health and fitness magazine, which ultimately became Experience Life, to a larger organization, now called Lifetime, the Healthy Way of Life company, then called Lifetime Fitness. And there's a beginning of about a 15-year period in my career where I started a magazine really having effectively never worked for a magazine before. I really did not have a lot of journalistic experience. But I found I took to it really naturally, and it was emerging for me of some things I loved, like teaching, and also writing and reading and researching and learning. And that continuous growth and learning part is something that I still see as essential skill for being healthy in an unhealthy world. But it was such a pleasure and an honor to get to speak to so many people about so many interconnected topics. Experience Life is, I think, the world's first whole person healthy living magazine that's aimed at men and women, people of all ages, different motivations, different levels of health and fitness. And I guess that just, doing things that have never been done before is something that comes a little bit naturally to me, but it has to be something I care about. And these are the merging of all my passions. So that's how I got into it. That's the backstory.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And I read somewhere in your website or on your website that you had sort of a health crisis moment. You stomped your foot, right? I'm imagining this. You stomped your foot and it broke. Is that right?
Yeah, it was one of the most transformative moments, also probably one of the more humiliating moments I've experienced. We all talk about the importance of walking your talk in the health realm. I think this is something we're beginning to realize more and more, that a lot of people who present themselves as mavens and, idols of health and fitness are often supremely unhealthy on the inside. And the presentation of self that looks like six packs, abs, and body confidence is often underwritten by a kind of roiling self-doubt and self-loathing or misery. And I think what happened to me leading up to that fateful day of self-breakage is that I was already working on the health and fitness magazine, Experience Life, and I was doing a great job at it, and it was really stressing me out. I was doing a lot of things right, like eating whole foods and pursuing exercise and trying to do the things that we are told, millions of different things we are told we have to do to be healthy and happy. And instead of feeling better, I was actually in a downward spiral of feeling like I wasn't doing anything well enough and I couldn't get it all done to my satisfaction and my standards during the course of my busy days. And there was just a particular day where I had converging deadlines and demands on my time and also had committed to taking care of myself by going for a run. And I couldn't do it all. And I dropped the running shoes I was planning to put on and go outside and instead responded to an email as I heard it come in. And I found myself in this horrible place of not being able to direct my attention or focus to the work because my body was screaming at me and I was feeling sort of helpless. And in a moment of like, oh, great, this is fantastic. I'm going to just blow off steam. And I put that in quotes, blow off steam by just running up and down the stairs a bunch of times, which in my mind is such a American, Western, masculine solution to that problem. Like, I'm not going to feel my feelings. I'm just going to burn off the steam. So I went running up and down the stairs of my carriage house. And after 5 or 6 times up and down, I was sweating and breathless, but feeling no better inside. In fact, I was actually just had worked up a head of steam physically. And I was like, this isn't working. And I just stomped my foot in frustration so hard that it broke. And I heard the bone break. I felt it break. And I just fell on the floor sobbing and kind of shock. I mean, like literally traumatic shock in my body. I'd been, injured, effectively wounded. But it was, I don't know, Megan, it was like this series of thoughts came to me in rapid fashion, like clarity, the way that I think sometimes trauma does produce for you and adrenaline can produce, like survival level insight. And the first insight that I had was like, oh my God, I have just broken myself. Like I broke my body, I broke my skeleton with this self-directed fit of frustration. And that was really scary to me, that I was capable of that kind of violence against myself as the result of my own frustration.
Right.
And then the second thought I had was like, well, that's really kind of nothing new. I've been doing this for a while. And my body, to be fair, had sent up signals for years. It was not happy with what I was trying to do or attempting to pull from it, extract from my own cell tissue. I had rashes. I had aches, pains, troubles of various kinds, night sweats, crying jags, bone pain, stomach pain, back pain. And I just kept dealing with the symptoms like we've been taught to do. I get a cream for this, a pill for that, some Chinese medicine, acupuncture and stuff for that. I really wasn't addressing the underlying problem, which is that I was overdriving my available energy and capacity, and I wasn't nourishing or recovering at a rate that my body would be able to then repair itself with. So when I had that insight, I was like, well, that's just terrible. And I felt really bad about myself and for myself. And I'm like, well, this is terribly sad. I've just been ignoring myself. And then I also that's such a stupid thing to do, judging myself. And then I looked around and I realized, in this moment, when I thought about my other family and friends and people that I knew that I loved who were all suffering the same way, I realized I am not alone. This is a malady that is affecting almost all of us, and we all have accumulating symptoms and accumulating diagnoses and accumulating complaints and struggles while our capacity and resilience is being reduced. And that was this moment where I realized this is the problem I want to address. I want to address the underlying problem, not my rash or my headache or my night sweats, but the fact that the way we are attempting to live, the way we are being told we have to live to be satisfactory, good enough, is killing us all. So I developed a motto, break the rules or break yourself.
That's so
and
great.
Whenever I wrote this in magic marker and stuck it on basically an index card in my office, whenever I'm attempted to overdrive what my body is telling me, like, I need to take a break, I need to hydrate, I need to eat, I need to be around people who love me. But that fateful day of foot breakage will live forever in infamy in my mind as the day I did break myself. And I made a commitment to not do that again. And that's sometimes a difficult commitment. Walking that talk, though, is something that keeps me honest and has so far kept me on the good red road. So
That's a pretty incredible story. And I think it was a loud moment, right? Sometimes we have these whisperings of moments over so many years. We sort of ignore those whisperings, but the really loud moments are hard to ignore. So I'm interested to know, since I've recently read your book, The Healthy Deviant, A Beginner's Guide to Being Healthy in an Unhealthy World, which so much of this title I love. But I found as I was reading it, I had this desire to become part of a rebellious group of people that were like, I am a rebel and I will do things differently, right? And I wondered, how did you develop this concept around, and I hate to say doing what's right, right? But taking care of ourselves as having to be deviant and rebellious. And how have you found that translate to the people that have kind of jumped on board with you?
Such a great question, Megan. Well, back when I was at Experience Life, so I started that magazine with Lifetime in 2001. And, by the time close to a decade had passed, I think I was becoming more radicalized than the organization. And really, I think I wrote an essay called Being Healthy is a Revolutionary Act. And it sat there for a while. I started to develop kind of a manifesto around that. The company wasn't particularly interested in it. I thought it was really cool. I ended up, making it into a feature article and a little pull-out manifesto. It's now a chapbook that I actually sell in print. But I think when I wrote that piece and the manifesto is a manifesto for thriving in a mixed-up world, I realized that there was a kind of resistance against that language of revolution and renegade and disruption that wasn't real popular among corporations. And I realized I really couldn't pursue it while I was at Lifetime. But there was also a response to that piece and to that concept that was really powerful among a certain subset, a population of like, yeah, man, I feel that way too. Thank you for giving it language. And those people were the people that I was excited to spend more time with and connect with. And I was like, I think these are the people I want to talk to. From there, I ended up earning out all of the work that I did on that project, Revolutionary Act, which then became a mobile app. It's still kind of partially functioning. Just shout to the universe. If anybody out there is a really talented web developer and wants to work in partnership with me on creating the next version of this thing and melding it with Healthy Deviants, I would love that. Right now, it's just sitting out there. I think it doesn't even work on Android anymore, but it was like 101 revolutionary ways to be healthy. And this app, very simple, has, a revolutionary act of the day and, 101 different ways to kind of pursue this sort of revolutionary thinking. 250,000 people downloaded that app within the course of a couple of months. And this is before apps were really a thing, it was very new. And I think that was the moment where I realized, there is space for this language. There's space for this perspective within our culture, or maybe as a subculture. And I'm cool with that. I don't need to talk to everybody. I want to talk to the people who want to hear what I have to say. Back to my experience on the Fulbright, right? I don't just want to be any kind of teacher. And I guess I've just felt passionate about it ever since. So when I eventually I left the magazine in Lifetime and I got through my Huffington Post moment and I started working on this book, The Healthy Deviant. Initially, I think it was called The Art of Being Healthy in an Unhealthy World or something, the revolutionary art of. And I landed on Healthy Deviants and I just couldn't let it go. I just really felt like that was the truth of being a deviant means deviating from the accepted norms and behaviors of your current society. And I was like, that's what's happening. To be a healthy person, you have to deviate from all of these norms and expectations and patterns and defaults and incentives. And I'll tell you what, that title, even more than revolutionary, really scared the pants off of people. A lot of publishers would not touch that book with a 10-foot pole, including some that might surprise you, like more progressive publishers. I had a really hard time with finding the right publisher. And now I find people are actually super psyched. I've got like stickers made up, people who want to have t-shirts that say The Healthy Deviant. I have like water bottles and swag, and people are like, yeah, man, that's me, count me in. So the fact that you responded to it, Megan, I think, it's obviously meant for you. And I've been working ever really since then. I was giving a talk at the University of Minnesota, one of the first talks I gave about my book for their Center for Spirituality and Healing. And interesting, the book is often perceived as not just a physical health book, but a mental and spiritual health book, which I'm very honored by. I got invited to speak, and at the end of my talk, someone raised their hand and said, "This is me. This is what I want to be a part of this community. How can I get involved?" And I was like, I don't know. I didn't have a web page. I mean, I barely had a web page. I didn't have a Facebook group or anything. But now there is a Facebook group, like 3,000 and plus people strong, and I have a lot of online programs and people following it and starting to hashtag Healthy Deviant or identify as Healthy Deviants. And I won't say it's a massive movement, but I think it's a growing movement of people who are willing to find the deeper meaning in being healthy, not just the outcome of looking or being, even form and function, but like finding an identity in deviating from the unhealthy norms that are so promoted in our society. So I'm glad you want to be part of it.
I love that so much. And I think with so much content coming at us every day, telling us the rules, one of the things I really liked about the way that you bring this to people is that we get to choose our own path. And there's not a right and a wrong, which is much needed in the world of health and functional medicine and all those things.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
I will just say, in the spirit of inclusion, it's really important for me that people understand that being a healthy deviant doesn't mean doing all the healthy things all the time perfectly. A healthy deviant is really somebody who's just willing to defy more unhealthy norms and conventions than they were yesterday. Having the intention to become healthier and happier in a world that often makes us less so is the first act of a healthy deviant, waking up to the fact that if you go along with the crazy that passes for normal and you comply with it, you're only going to be taken down by it. So one step at a time, and there's no one way to do it. People of healthy deviants of all stripes. The Healthy Deviant Manifesto has 3 points. 1, subvert the unhealthy default reality. 2, call out the crazy. When you see it, point at it, laugh so other people can see it too. And the third one is make it a party. It's like, I think healthy living is an absolute blast, and it needs to be made to be more fun and more inclusive and not such a slog of misery and self-denial and people fighting, paleo, vegan, keto, just a lot of ways to do it. You do you. You'll find your way eventually to the thing that works for your N of 1.
So great.
This is awesome. I can't help, of course, but think of the dental deviant, and when we can work together to write that one, that's just I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, this is solid gold. So,
well, and I will say just on that front, we did a piece in Experience Life many years ago, very early on, about biologic and functional dentistry and oral health care. And I got to see Megan's talk at the Functional Medicine Conference in Vegas not so long ago when we were both there. And I'm really excited that people are starting to look at the mouth as something other than a peripheral to the rest of this thing, and seeing it as the center and elemental, fundamental underpinnings of health that it really is. And again, seeing it as a system, dealing with the underlying issues that produce so much of what we think of as oral health, but problems, but that often are also, deeply rooted in the gut, the brain, and 1,000 other sources of inflammation. And so I would love to have a whole conversation about the way we perceive health and health problems, including oral health and their solutions, anytime.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah. And you're coming back.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, the call out the crazy is so spot on. Like in my world of helping people with oral health every day, it's like, so, the 12th root canal didn't help, I mean, like this, it's a crazy world in the oral health, but that'll be another day.
Yeah.
So I am curious, you have lived in different places. You had this Fulbright scholarship. I mean, you've done a lot of really cool and interesting things. I would imagine that living in different cultures and different settings, you've probably seen different norms and trends. And I'm curious, in your experience and in your opinion, what have you found to be most supportive to health and also similarly or contrarily, what are the things that don't work so well?
Well, I think the thing that I find most consistent in the places that have, what I think of as healthier outcomes culturally, whether they're, family units or communities or cities or states or, countries, is a connection, first of all, with nature. nature's seasons, nature's cycles, nature's rhythms, eating things that come more from nature, spending time in nature, and seeing yourself as somehow connected to something larger than you that looks like a natural system. I think that the rhythm of life in healthier cultures is one that looks more like a natural rhythm. It's oscillating rhythms of times of high productivity recovered by rest and recovery, honoring space for relaxation and enjoyment and pleasure, for example. France was great for that, like longer times to eat and to connect, limited times to work and focus, and an appreciation for the simple things in life, including each other's company and good food. And, that whole French paradox, we love to separate, like, why French women don't get fat or whatever it is. Like, it's not just what we're eating, it's how we're living. So that more holistic perspective, I think, is appreciated, a quality of life perspective. I think in the places that things don't work so well, it's often an industrial machine approach to living, which is more is better, faster is better, cheaper is better, at least on the front end, it seems cheaper. And it's a sense of disconnection from nature and, human-based dependencies on natural systems and each other. And I think, US culture, Western culture, wherever we have exported it, categorically has become less healthy and happy rather quickly. And people who come here from other cultures that were healthy where they lived, when they show up here and start eating and living and producing according to the standards of our society, rapidly lose their health and fitness and end up in a medical system that often does not serve them either. So I think a lot of it has to do with understanding natural systems, I guess, if I had to sum it up. And I think what works when we understand that we are part of nature and a product of it and deeply interdependent in some ways on it. I'm not so sure that nature needs us, but she certainly makes good use of us in some ways. I think that's the biggest conundrum of our time, is understanding that scalability is not necessarily the goal. Living in a harmonic agreement with nature's scale and nature's rhythms is really a much smarter way to go. And I think for most of us, that means slowing down enough to be able to notice what our own body minds are telling us. The first nonconformist competency of Healthy Deviance is amplified awareness. And I think we are living in a culture that runs on lack of it and produces more of it. And if there's one healthy skill to learn, it's that. Like, what's happening to me? What's happening to everyone around me? What feels good when I do it and what feels crap? Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it.
Certainly.
Yeah, it's a really good lead into something I wanted to chat with you about. I say, people are probably really sick of hearing me say this, but I say very regularly to my patients and to my colleagues, just because it's common does not mean it's normal. And I find so often when new patients come in that I'm telling them something that is absolutely new to them. It's a concept of like, oh, no, you don't have to feel this way.
Yes.
But one of the things, I was thinking about while reading your book is it's one thing to know that there's an opportunity to deviate from the norm, but it's another to not even know that there's an option. Think that this is just it. This is normal aging. It is normal to be 60 years old and barely able to move and feeling like garbage and on 8 prescriptions, right? And especially here in the States, I think we're leading the way in this mindset, it feels like. So just in your experience of communicating with so many people and being part of the health industry for so long, where do you think this stems from, that we've come to just accept feeling poorly as a normal part of being on the planet, much less aging?
Good question again. Where does it come from? Well, if I go back 2.5 million years in human history, I look at the fact that we lived one way for most of that 2.5 million years. And then there was an abrupt change at the time of the agricultural revolution that had us massively changing almost everything about the way that we ate, because we had surpluses and domesticated plants and animals. We moved into towns and villages and cities. We changed from all being hunter-gatherers to being specialized as artisans and farmers, and eventually separated into haves and have-nots and got all the political and religious nonsense that had us off to the races. It also produced really massive changes in technology. And the changes in technology produced the Industrial Revolution about 200 years ago. which rapidly produced the technological revolution of about 60 years ago, which rapidly, very rapidly produced the digital revolution of about 25 years ago, at which time everybody started having these handheld and home-based devices. That was not true. For more than half of my life, we did not have those. I'm 57. And to think that in half of my lifetime, everything has changed about our daily lives. Everything that has happened in particularly the last 200 or so years, has put us at such an immense disagreement from an evolutionary biology perspective with our DNA, our roots. That evolutionary mismatch is at the root of a lot of our problems. But a big part of it is not just our food supply or our sedentary lives, it's the media and the access that's constant and unrelenting of images that have us wanting more, wanting to be different than we are, believing that we're unacceptable as we are, and selling us on solutions that simply do not work, but that have us consuming then more and more of them. And that setup, I think, is where a lot of this stuff begins. So to help people break through that is not a simple matter of selling them on a particular diet or a particular exercise routine or a mindfulness app or even just getting more sleep. I wrote a piece in my Substack, which is Healthy Deviant Digest, called The Hoodwinking of Health Seekers. That's sort of a pivotal piece. And almost everything I write in my newsletter is addressing the fundamental question that you're asking, like, how did this happen to us and how do we get out of it? In my book, I call it the misunderstood problem and the renegade solution. And so we're talking about the misunderstood problem. It's not you, it's the unhealthy default reality that we're living in that was produced by this unprecedented set of events historically. A podcast that I have with my friend Dallas Hartwig, co-founder of The Whole30, is called The Living Experiment. Because I just think it's important to remember we are the first generation in the history of humanity to be attempting to live the way that we are. And no wonder we're having to figure it out. Nobody was able to teach us this the way our grandfathers and grandmothers were able to teach us hunting and gathering over the course of generations. We no longer have those skills, and we're struggling to find the skills that we need to survive in this culture, what I call the survival skills of the modern era, new era survival skills. So I say, when I talk about nonconformist competencies, being amplified awareness. The second one is called preemptive repair, which is getting ahead of the damage done to us by living in this culture. And then the third is continuous growth and learning. And that's really about understanding with a kind of beginner's mind and adventurer's spirit that we can't learn all of the skills we need to be healthy in this culture all at once. And we're learning them day by day together. And I think the work that we are doing, I'm doing and you guys are both doing, is attempting to intervene in what would otherwise be a pretty much vicious cycle for folks and helping to disrupt the dynamics that have us, I think, taking most of us down. But it is going to take more than diet and exercise to pull that off. I think it fundamentally is a reframing of the problem. And again, an embracing of a renegade series of solutions, which is also a fun adventure. I don't want to make it sound like it's all hard work. I'm happier and healthier, I think, than I've ever been as the result of embracing this as a fun party, not as a downward bummer of a slog. So that's, I guess, my short-ish answer.
Well, I love that because I think a lot about generational wisdom, and it's profound actually that we can't tap into that from a lifestyle and health perspective in the way that generations before us could. I visited Sardinia about a year ago with my husband, and one of the gentlemen we were hanging out with was talking about how every weekend they all went to grandma's house and they sat in these concentric circles where the elders sat in the middle and then the next generation in one circle outside of the elders and so on and so forth till you get to all the little kids in, the giant circle around the living room. And the grandmother would sit in the middle and I mean, this is current day. This is happening right now, right? And would tell stories and teach the family things. And this is happening every single weekend. And I always joke when people say, well, I want to do a Blue Zones trip to Sardinia. And I'm like, good luck to you, dear. Because eating their tomatoes and whatever else you may be doing there is not even close to what they're experiencing in their lives, where they still have access to that health, which is a totally different thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you should bring that up. Dan Buettner is a friend of mine
Yeah.
and also from the Twin Cities area, and was kind enough to blurb my book when it first came out. And he was a featured guest and a featured source in the magazine. And I think the Blue Zones concept is really useful in some ways.
Yes.
Which is like, let us notice, like I was saying before, where people are healthier, even in part. Why might they be that way? I do think it's always been a challenge for me, some of the conclusions drawn by Blue Zone's work. Although Dan is great about embracing, it's culture, it's not just the food. But I just don't think you can separate any of those different individual pieces and try to emulate them in this culture and think that it's going to go as well as you might hope. I think fundamentally it's learning the skills of navigating in this culture that are important. And we can learn. Social support is important. Honoring traditions are important. Getting beyond, just accumulation as the evidence of success in life is important. And almost all traditional cultures have that, regardless of where you find them around the globe. But chasing centenarian status, again, just seems like a classically Western goal to me. Like, we all want to live to be 120 and in perfect condition. I don't think that's really the goal either. I could say more, but I really do think you're right. While a certain amount of health tourism might be useful, like when I went to France, I did notice the difference in the pacing of life. I did notice the difference in the quality of the conversations and the pleasure that people took in each other's company and the arguments that they would have about things that we would never consider talking about here. Talking about sex and politics and religion and all sorts of other things, it was considered to be almost a source of nutrients to get into these chargy conversations and face off with each other. It was like doing a tango, And I think that there's a certain amount of that real life intensity you just cannot duplicate or paste on to a culture, that intimacy that we are hungry for each other's real company, for example. It has to be modeled for you. It has to be socially approved of. You have to learn the skills to do it without injuring yourself or each other, much like a martial arts practice. And I just think that's part of the reason I love Healthy Deviance, is it's a big part of its principle is embrace it as an adventure, as a journey. I just got done running a 7-day Healthy Deviant adventure. In my book, there's a 14-day Healthy Deviant adventure that I want people to embrace it that way. But I do think it takes other people. I think this is a very lonely path to try to walk by yourself. So part of my passion is connecting people in that sense of a shared quest. How can we create a healthier world with and for each other? How can we make it easier for our friends and the next generations coming along? I think young people are suffering so much for lack of the skills that they need to survive in this very challenging environment. And I really want to begin transmitting some of this stuff to younger people as well, so they can learn too.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
Amen. Well, we want to thank you for being you're actually our very first guest on the Whole Health podcast.
And I'm even more honored now.
We feel so blessed by the time and your wisdom that you've shared. And I'm curious, kind of as the last parting question, one, what does whole health mean to you? And if there were one gold nugget that you could share with our listeners, just break it down to that, right? What would that be? What would be your parting piece of wisdom?
Well, I think the most important thing is to see in whole person the truth that you're not just a person. You're a person in connection with the whole world and a community. And your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social health are all components of that. But I think anytime you see yourself as an isolated unit beyond the reach of and touch of a larger world, you will not ever feel whole or healthy in your entirety. So my golden nugget would be expand your definition of health and expand your willingness to embrace solutions beyond diet and exercise and daily habits or choices or willpowering your way through, a quote unquote healthy lifestyle. I just wrote this in another piece. Like, I hate the word healthy lifestyle. There's not a style. It's not a fashion. This is something that I think of as a very sacred quest and a becoming of a full person that is the whole reason we're here in the first place. So that's my nugget.
Wow.
Thank you.
It's incredible. Thank you so much for being with us, Pilar. It really was such a gift and very inspiring to speak with you. And we know your time is precious. So thank you.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for considering these somewhat wild ideas. And let's talk more about the disruptive oral health story as well, because I think Healthy Deviants, much like veterinary medicine, actually, dentistry and oral health is one of those access points to a radically different way of approaching human health in general that I think it's worth talking about. So I'm looking forward to doing more with you.
Good.
Cool.
Let's do it again.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Whole Health Podcast.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, please follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can find out more about us at thewholehealthpodcast.com.
You can find me on my website, blodgettdentalcare.com.
And you can find me at bioloungepdx.com or learn more about my organic soluble fiber supplement, Fluorosophy, at thinkfluorosophy.com.
We look forward to seeing you next time.